Order. Welcome to meeting number 30 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Citizenship and Immigration. The Board of Internal Economy requires that committee adheres to the following health protocols: maintain a physical distance of at least 2 meters from others, wear a non-medical mask unless seated, and preferably wear a mask at all times, including when seated. Maintain proper hand hygiene by using the hand sanitizer provided in the committee room, and regularly wash your hands well with soap. As the chair, I will be enforcing these measures for the duration of this meeting, and I thank everyone for their cooperation. Today's meeting is taking place in a hybrid format pursuant to House of Order, January 25th, 2021. I would like to outline a few rules to follow. Interpretation services are available for this meeting. You may speak in the official language of your choice. At the bottom of your screen, you may choose to hear floor audio or in English or French. With the latest Zoom version, you do not need to select a corresponding language channel before speaking. The raise hand feature is on the main toolbar. Should you wish to speak, a reminder that all comments should be addressed through the chair. When you are not speaking, your microphone should be muted. The committee clerk and I will maintain a speaking list for all members. Today, we will be hearing from the IRCC officials, and they will be giving a briefing on the pathway to permanent residency for essential temporary workers and international graduates. They are appearing before the committee and will respond to the questions on the new pathway program, as well as respond to any questions on broader immigration figures. I would like to welcome Marianne Campbell-Jarvis, Assistant Deputy Minister, Strategic and Program Policy, and Daniel Mills, Assistant Deputy Minister Operations from the Department of Citizenship and Immigration. Thanks a lot, Madam Jarvis and Mr. Mills, for appearing before the committee today, and thanks a lot for all the hard work which you do on behalf of all Canadians. You will have 5 minutes for your opening remarks. You can please proceed, and then we will go into round of questioning. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair and members of the committee, for inviting us here today. J'aimerais faire quelques remarques préliminaires et ensuite nous serons heureux de répondre à vos questions.
Some preliminary remarks, and we'll be happy to answer your questions. As everyone knows, immigration is essential to Canada. What is the importance of immigration for Canada is related to the need of an agile and adaptable immigration system. As you know, last year, our minister announced a new immigration level plan that targets to increase the number to 1.2 million people over 3 years.
We were optimistic that admissions would be supported by entrants from abroad with the easing of border measures restricting travel for approved permanent residents. However, given the ongoing need for our current border and travel restrictions to protect the health and safety of people in Canada, the government is looking at some creative additional measures that aim to capitalize on the talent and contributions of immigrants who are already in Canada. We have in fact known for years that temporary residents make good candidates for permanent residence, as many have formed community ties that help them make a seamless transition to permanent resident status. Accordingly, the government made a decision to use public policies to launch on May 6th a one-time pathway to permanent residence for over 90,000 temporary residents already in Canada. This initiative focuses on 3 particular groups. The first is the group of healthcare and some other essential workers who have been on the front line of getting us through the pandemic. The second group are international student graduates who have recently graduated from Canadian institutions given the tremendous contributions these graduates make to our economy and our society. And third, French-speaking candidates who we hope will settle in and support the vitality of Francophone minority communities outside of Quebec. These public policies will end on November 5th, 2021, or once the program stream has reached its maximum intake limit. These limits are 40,000 applications for international student graduates, 20,000 applicants for temporary foreign workers in healthcare, and 30,000 applications for temporary foreign workers in other selected essential occupations. As noted, we have established streams for French-speaking applicants in these three groups, and we have not set a limit on the number of applications we will take in these streams. In terms of reaction to the initiative, the stream for international graduates reached its capacity at midday on May 7th, about 25 hours after it opened. We are monitoring the other streams and information on the number of applications we are receiving, and it is available in real time on the IRCC website. Madam Chair, this pathway to permanent residence acknowledges the extraordinary service of newcomers to Canada throughout the pandemic. Et, dans un sens plus large, elle vise à la fois à mobiliser les immigrants qui sont déjà ici et à fournir au Canada la main-d'œuvre dont il a besoin pour sa reprise économique après la pandémie. J'espère que cette information.
I hope that these information will give the committee some background regarding our recent actions. We would now be happy to answer your questions.
Thank you, Ms. Jarvis. We will now go to our round of questions. Our first round will be of 6 minutes each. We will start with Mr. Helen. Mr. Helen, you will have 6 minutes for your round of questions. You can please start.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I just want to take this time to really thank the officials for not only coming here on such short notice, but making yourselves so available and for all the great work that you've been doing throughout this entire pandemic. So thank you again from all of us. Some immediate questions that come up for most people are, given that with the big number of applications that are being accepted, do we have the capacity or resources with our current resources in order to handle the processing of these applications?
Oui, bonjour, Madame la Présidente. Merci beaucoup pour la question.
Very much for the question. Yes, indeed, this is a major challenge that we have in terms of processing capacity. However, we are convinced that we have the capacity to process these applications that we've received last week, and the department has planned that until the end of the calendar year, that is December 31st, that the department will be able to process 35 to 40,000 people who have made an application through this process last week. So as you know, we're focusing our efforts on the people in Canada that are in Canada already because they are here. So it's easier for us also to process the applications. Regarding those who are still abroad, it's a bit more complicated because the various restrictions. So I'm sorry.
A little above your upper lip. Thank you. So maybe this would be better. Like interpretation and interpreters were having a bit problem. So you can please start.
So do you want me to start from the beginning? No.
From where you where I interrupted you.
Where I was? Yeah. Okay, perfect. No.
So I just wanted to conclude in saying that given our capacity right now, we're quite confident that we're going to be able to process these applications this year, which are between 35 and 40,000 people until December 31st of this year.
The next question, obviously, given that there's already so many problems with backlogs, and we hear this continuously, especially when it comes to programs like family reunification and the amount of mental stress it's causing because of the backlogs, can you let us know, are we are we pulling resources away from other programs in order to process these applications first, or are we hiring new resources? Can you please elaborate?
Merci beaucoup, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Mrs. Chair, for the question. Indeed, the department has redirected some resources in order to give priority to a family category, as we have announced already, because this is a priority for us. I'm quite happy also to report to you that with regard to the family category, we were able to have a lot of progress. We have processed more than 20,000 applications since January. So we have increased the number of applications treated. Now, we have hired additional staff to support us in the processing of applications in Canada, but also we have used the capacity that we had in some business lines, for example, like visitors. As you know, international visitors cannot travel currently given the travel restrictions at the border. So we used that capacity to help us to advance in other business lines, amongst others, the family reunification, but also on the Canada experience, as well as other priorities of our department.
Much, but the question again raises is that, are we pulling resources off another one? We heard that you're prioritizing, but I think you said you're prioritizing family, but how about the program that's 90,000? Are we pulling resources from other programs for this one? And also, if you can, that's my first question. The second one, please elaborate on where are these going to be, these 90,000, where are they going to be processed?
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Ms. Chair. To respond to that question, we have realigned resources coming from the visitors pathway, so the temporary visitors. So this has slowed down because there is no tourism, given the fact that our borders are still closed. So we used the capacity that we had in that business line and redirected it to other priorities or to other business lines which are important. And I think you also mentioned where the processing will be done. This will be done in Canada. We have a network that is integrated. So we have officials everywhere in Canada who are going to work on this new business line and to process the applications accordingly. So it's not one specific region. It's going to be throughout an integrated network that these applications will be processed.
And if you could also just clarify to us, and do you feel that there will be any hindrance on the backlog clearing due to this new program?
Merci, Madame.
Thank you, Ms. Chair. At the moment, we are reducing the processing time and the inventory, the backlog that we have in most of our business lines. So, as you know, we've had additional funds allocated a couple of months ago in the supplementary budget. So thank you for having approved this. This allowed us to commit additional funds and allowed us to.
Mr. Mills, time is up for Mr. Hallen. We will now proceed to Mr. Sidhu. Mr. Sidhu, you will have 6 minutes. You can please proceed.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I want to thank the whole department for all of your hard work, and Mr. Mills and Ms. Jarvis. We really appreciate you taking the time to join us here today. I know the announcement of the 90,000 new pathway to permanent residency was very well received by so many. Ms. Jarvis, you had mentioned this pathway applies to 3 groups, the healthcare essential workers, international students, as well as French-speaking candidates. And you also mentioned the international student pathway filled up really, really quickly. Would you be able to provide some feedback or insights into what the update would be for the other groups? As I understand, the uptake has not been as strong. And if you can please provide some info on why, why you think the other groups have less uptake in your opinion.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair, for the question. There's always a lot for us to assess in terms of client behavior when we start a new program. I think one of the reasons why we saw such a strong uptake on international graduates is we've already seen quite a strong uptake in the past. And what I mean by that is if we look at 2019 data, we know that a number of the temporary residents who transitioned to permanent residence, a large proportion of those people were already, were in fact international students. So there's a bit of a known pathway there. And unlike which the one for the healthcare workers in particular, and the essential workers stream, those pathways might not be quite as clear or as known. We certainly do have other workers in an essential stream or in a healthcare stream that have made that transition. But typical with some of the other pilots, for example, that we've run in the past, sometimes it can take a little bit longer for a more innovative pathway to take root. And so we have these pathways open for 6 months to allow that time for essential workers and healthcare workers to submit their applications. And that's why we've allowed that 6-month window until November 5th. So we'll see about client behavior. And I know colleagues here in the department, we're watching this transition, temporary workers to permanent residents. And we know we'll also learn a lot through the process, as well as bring in permanent residents who are already here and already contributing to Canada's economy and to help bolster our economic recovery and our society going forward.
Thank you for that very detailed response. I know and I feel like a lot of international graduates would appreciate, should those spots not be used by the November deadline, maybe they can be opened up for some of the international graduates should the healthcare workers or essential workers not be able to fill up that capacity there. I appreciate that. We were just talking about capacity in terms of processing and backlog, and I know in the budget there was some funding mentioned in terms of really making the immigration system more efficient. Can you speak to more details about that?
Certainly, I'll begin, and I think my colleague, Mr. Mills, may have some comments on the efficiency. So the pandemic has really encouraged a lot of innovation and some of it forced by necessity. But as I think the Deputy Minister noted before CIMM, a lot of those innovations and efficiencies we're hoping to carry on afterwards. Some really good examples from virtual citizenship ceremonies online. The budget investments are helping in the client support center, as well as in the digital platform modernization, which is to modernize the legacy system here at IRCC. And we wish to move beyond the paper-based processing onto a digital program, which will help us better meet the needs of clients and provide that service going forward. Mr. Mills, I don't know if there's anything specific that you wish to add.
Merci, Madame Chair. Je vais enclencher.
Thank you very much. I'm just going to expand on what my colleague has said with respect to this. We are now digitizing certain files, and that will allow us to process these files remotely. There are restrictions that exist presently throughout the world, so these digitized files are going to allow us to seize the opportunity in that they are files that can be processed within Canada or on an international basis. So digitization is something is going to allow us to increase our processing capacity, or at the very least, adjust our processing capacity. This is one of the efficiencies that is a result of the pandemic. But it will be beneficial for our clients.
I appreciate that. I know the minister is working really hard in terms of efficiencies and obviously adding more capacity. So I think I have 10 seconds left, but I just want to thank you guys again for your tireless work. It's definitely been a challenging time, but I really want to commend the whole department. Thanks again.
Thank you, Mr. Sidhu. We will now proceed to Madame Normandin. Madame Normandin, you will have 6 minutes. You can please proceed.
Merci beaucoup, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and thank you to our guest today. First of all, I would like to say, since it's a program that affects Canada and not Quebec, I'd have one or two questions, and then I'm going to share my time with Mr. Manley. My question deals with the Francophone stream, the French-speaking stream of your program. It would seem that it filled up very quickly. Is there any monitoring that is being done about the number of applications that were made to be part of the program? Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Thank you for the question.
A couple of points. We have indeed included a Francophone stream in the new pathway. We are watching this very carefully and very closely to see the level of interest, and we're certainly hopeful that the response will be strong. Unlike the other pathways, we have not put in a cap. Mm-hmm. And part of that reason is because we do want it to be open, and we want those numbers to be as strong as possible to really help meet the target that our minister has set towards the 4.4% of a Francophone target by 2023. But we will continue to monitor, and we will look forward to keeping the committee updated over time as those results come in. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Merci beaucoup. Et justement, pour faire suite à cette question-là, bon, on sait...
And thank you for the other aspects of the program. According to either one thing or the other, either all the places will be filled by November, or it will end as soon as the limit is reached. But this is somewhat different. I'm thinking about the possibility of perhaps extending it beyond November to open it to people who do speak French.
Thank you again, Madam Chair, for the question and some interesting suggestions and ideas from the honourable member. At the moment, the pathways are a special one-time 6-month measure, and I think that's the plan. In terms of processing those for this year, that's something to which my colleague Mr. Mills could speak, but I would certainly share with the committee that part of the thinking behind this measure is to maximize the level space for 2021, given the borders being closed. But however, we're not only thinking about this year, we're also looking ahead to 2022 and beyond 2023. And so all of the levers that we have to support strong immigration in Canada are ones that are being looked at. And the Francophone targets are of great importance to the minister. Mr. Mills, I don't know if you would like to add just a couple of comments on the processing.
Merci, Madam Chair.
Yeah, I just want to add that we will give a follow-up, and we'll be looking very closely at the applications that we receive in this Francophone stream. We are looking at between 35 and 44,000 this year alone to process. And the applications that we have received so far are minimal, but nonetheless, we are constantly following up what is happening, and both the Anglophone and the Francophone applications. Thank you so much. I'll give my time now to Mr. Manley.
Oh, thank you very much, Madame Normandine. Merci for sharing your time. And thank you to Mr. Mills and Madame Jarvet for being here today. I'm sorry I missed the first part of this, but I do have some questions. In terms of the temporary foreign workers that are coming here that are going to receive this exemption, is there something to help them bring their families here? A lot of workers come here on a seasonal basis year after year after year, and I'm just wondering if there's a pathway for family members to join them.
Thank you very much for the question, Madam Chair. Certainly, the way that we are looking at this pathway is the principal applicant is here in Canada. And we will be looking at the subsequent family pathways. As I think Madam Chair, committee members know, certainly there is always a lot of interest in the family reunification streams, and through the pandemic, the department has been putting a priority processing on family. And a number of the department's immigration streams.
Sorry for interrupting.
Family reunification.
Sorry for interrupting, Ms. Jarvis. Your time is up. We will now proceed to Ms. Kwan. Ms. Kwan, you will have 6 minutes for your round of questioning. You can please proceed.
Thank you very much to all the officials for being here today. The program explicitly excludes undocumented workers and those who are without status. What advice did the officials give to the minister to exclude them?
Good. Thank you very much, Madam Chair, for that question. I don't know that it's a question so much of exclusion versus inclusion and what was going to be the focus. If we look in the context that we're in, we know that the borders are closed, and there's an emphasis being placed on the in-Canada population. And the minister had noted a few times that temporary residents who are here, from international graduates, healthcare workers, essential workers, are contributing. One of the pieces that we also did think about is that if there were those that were here without status or without authorization, we didn't want to be penalizing those who had taken the necessary steps to secure their status. So there's a bit of a sense of fairness and the level playing field in this.
Thank you. With the exception of this, of course, right? The Guardians Angel program actually included people without status, but for this program, it excluded them. I would urge the officials to consider actually including them. It is about exclusion. When you don't include people in this process, it does exclude them. And many of the folks that I'm talking about are people who are already here, and some of them lost their status as a result of the pandemic because they have a employer-specific work permit, to which they were not able to secure another LMIA in order to regain their status. So these are real issues that are happening on the ground with people. So I would urge the officials to consider that and to give that advice to the minister to include those individuals. With respect to the digitizing process, what is the timeline for all the applications to be digitalized?
Thanks for the question, Madam Chair. I'll turn to my colleague on on the processing dimension, but just to note, it's actually that the application process is digital from the outset. And that
I don't mean for this program. I mean overall, because that's part of the process the ministry is undertaking right now.
Oh, thank you, Madam Chair, for the clarification.
Is there a timeline?
Mr. Mills, I'll ask you to speak to the timeline. That's the digitization that we've been doing on the paper-based programs.
Merci, Madame la Présidente, pour la question. Donc, on a entrepris un virage.
Thank you very much. Well, really, we've made a strategic move at the beginning of the year with respect to digitization of files. More than 30,000 of them have been digitized in the various business lines. Caregivers,
had in our offices have been sent to a third-party organization pour la numérisation et on travaille en étroite collaboration avec
and we were able, therefore, to digitize them and increase the volume. We, of course, want to be sure that.
I could just interrupt. Do you have a timeline by way of a date when you expect the applications in the different streams would be completed in this digitizing process?
Oui, Madame la Présidente. Donc, dans certaines.
Yes, for certain classes, family class, for example, at the international level, we've finished digitizing the files, or we'll be finished by end June, all the files in the department. For that, as far as caregivers, it would be at the end of the summer. In July, we should have much of the files digitized, and we will be able to process them throughout Canada. So yes, the business line has made the most progress, perhaps.
Does that include making the intake digital, which is what was referred to in the budget?
Oui, Madame la Présidente, merci pour la question.
Yes, thank you for the question. Yes, we have launched a program at the beginning of May, a pilot project for a digital intake for some business lines. And we have a pilot for the Atlantic for Agri-Food Canada. And it is directly involved in this pilot project. Over the course of the summer, we will expand our various business lines so that we will be able to bring in all our programs with a digital intake, as we say.
The officials to actually table to the committee all the different streams and what their timelines are, and including the digital intake as well as the applications that have already been submitted in paper form. With respect to the new program, one of the concerns is that there is actually an unfair advantage for those who do not have access to internet. For some of the TFWs, so they've already expressed that they don't have access to the equipment or the broadband in order to submit their application. Has the ministry considered
this? Sorry for interrupting, Ms. Kwan. Time is up. You can ask this question when your turn comes next.
Maybe I can get that answer in response in writing from the officials.
Okay. We will now proceed to Mr. Seebeck. As we start our second round of questioning, Mr. Seebeck, you will have 5 minutes for your round of questioning. Just before we go, I see the analyst Martin has raised his hand. Yes, please. Yes, Martin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to double check with the official. Are you confirming that you will take up that undertaking? Sometimes we have confusion about which undertakings are agreed to and which ones are not. So if I could clarify with the official in this case, we would appreciate it from our end.
I see Ms. Jarvis would like to say something. Ms. Jarvis?
Madam Chair, if it's all right with you, I think I understood the last question from the honourable member. There were two questions. One was about the timelines and the digitization across the streams, and then the second undertaking was the question that we ran out of time for, which was about access to internet and had that been considered.
Are these the two questions, Ms. Kwan?
And so sorry, Ms. Kwan.
Sorry. Yes, those are the questions. So for the TFWs whose application they're not able to submit online because they don't have access to the equipment or have internet problems because they're out, in the rural communities and so on. And how will we address that from the department's perspective to ensure equitable access?
Thank you. Is it clarified? We are good. We will now proceed to Mr. Seebeck. Mr. Seebeck, you will have 5 minutes. You can please proceed.
Great. I was just wondering if the department knows what's the intake status of each of the three streams, the healthcare workers, the temporary workers, and the international students.
Yeah, thank you very much, Madam Chair, for the question. I'll turn to Mr. Mills, who has his finger on the pulse, but the international graduate cap is full. Mr. Mills, I wonder if you have the latest update on the other two streams.
Oui, merci beaucoup, Madame la Présidente. Donc,
yes, thank you. I have the numbers from 3 p.m. today. So for healthcare workers, we received 1,172 applications, and for other essential workers, we received 7,637 applications on a capacity of 30,000. I can also talk about the Francophone numbers. For healthcare workers, 16. And for other essential workers, 293. And for graduate students, 117.
Much. Those numbers seem fairly low, given when you look at things like family reunification, parent and grandparent. Those categories close within a couple of hours of them being open. I'm going to leave that to maybe somebody else on the committee to ask if there's insights as to why this has been slow in those categories so far. I want to go back to what Ms. Kwan was talking about with undocumented. There's a huge number of undocumented construction workers in the GTA and the Portuguese community. I've been approached by members of the Portuguese community numerous times about this. Again, is there, other than fairness, is there a rationale as to why we would not have wanted to expand the program to people like them? They've been gainfully employed in the construction industry sometimes for 20, 25 years. This to me seems like it would be a perfect pathway for them to become documented.
Thank you, Madam Chair, for that question. Certainly that it is a complex and challenging population to reach. In terms of there's numerous pathways, and perhaps just to speak to a few of them, as the Honourable Member Ms. Kwan noted, the Minister is certainly proud of the so-called guardian angels pathway that were the essential healthcare workers on the front lines. Some of those people had fallen out of status. They were asylum seekers whose claims might not have been successful. And so that was one that was undertaken. The department also has a pilot pathway of construction workers in the Greater Toronto area. And we've learned a lot about the population there. In terms of the temporary resident to permanent resident pathway that was just announced, I think it was really more a sense of what is the objective. And the core objective of that is really an economic pathway. And that economic pathway was about ensuring that Canada is well positioned, or as well positioned as it can be, for economic recovery through the pandemic. And so the pathways were open to international graduates whom we know have strong human capital, good language proficiency, Canadian work experience, and also to recognize the breadth and depth of Canada's economy with healthcare workers who we know are critical right now, and we want to recognize and acknowledge their contributions in the pandemic, as well as other essential workers on the front lines. And I think there are many lessons from COVID-19, and one of them is underscoring the range of jobs that are absolutely essential and critical to Canada's economy. And so that's what I think these temporary resident pathways were about, is facilitating and recognizing those that are here now contributing to Canada's economy and to go forward. So I hope that helps.
Sorry for interrupting. Time is up. We will now proceed to Mr. Dhaliwal. Mr. Dhaliwal, you will have 5 minutes for your round of questionings. You can please proceed.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I want to thank the officials as well. Great work on this announcement. The pathway was made very well in advance, but it wasn't clear as to what documents and information the applicants were required to be prepared to submit, which may have led to small errors and omissions in their applications. I would suggest the officials that instead of just rejecting that application, because even still today we can see those two categories are not full, they should be given a fair chance, a procedural fairness letter to address those concerns instead of just taking that application out. That is my suggestion. And the second one also, Madam Campbell Jarvis was talking about the essential work. Small restaurants. You go to many, you see those NOC code 6513 and NOC code 6711, food and beverage servers, food counter attendants, kitchen helpers. I go to a small restaurant. Those food servers, they are the ones who greet people. They are the ones that make them sit, then take the order, serve the food, and then at the end clean up the table, and then take the cashier. So I think though that category, I personally feel that should be a part of that essential workers stream, and I would request to you, the officials, and also through you to the minister to see if we can include those NOC codes into those categories, because those essential positions are still at 7,637 out of the 30,000. And many of the people have expressed frustration and confusion regarding the eligible NOC codes, conflicting information around that. Could officials please provide this committee in writing the list of all eligible NOC codes for 6 separate streams, and also the ones that they can include?
Thank you. Oh, thank you, Madam Chair. Some really excellent questions there. Just to take them in turn, with respect to the disparity in how quickly some of the applications are coming in, I think it really does come back to that client behavior. And we know that international graduates often seek that pathway. A number have made the transition before. So it wasn't surprising to us that they were in a way first out of the gate. But I don't think, it's still really early days on the other ones, and we have put forward that 6-month runway to really allow time for other essential workers and healthcare workers and francophone speakers to have that time to apply. So I think we're going to see some changes over the next couple of months, and there's still time left. So I don't think we need yet to worry. With respect to the question and comment about small restaurant owners, one thing in putting this together, and the minister had a lot of things to consider and a lot of priorities to balance, and by selecting particular NOC codes for essential, it certainly doesn't mean that other positions weren't essential, but we did hear from stakeholders, and when we look at employment data, in particular provided by the Labour Council, we know that there are certain areas where there are a number of Canadians that are ready to work. And so we weren't looking at codes where there would already be high unemployment rates. And so certainly the contribution of restaurant workers are really important in Canada and Canada's economy. But there was a lot of thought put behind the balance of that. And one of the other points that I wanted to mention, Madam Chair, is that all of the other pathways still exist. So the provincial nominee program, the rural and northern immigration pilot, the Atlantic immigration pilot. So all of those pathways still exist alongside this special temporary public policy that was put in place. And so there will be opportunities above and beyond on this pathway. I think I heard the last question was a undertaking for in writing the NOC codes that are part of this, as well as the ones that aren't. Certainly, we've made note of that. I would warn Madam Chair, the NOC code list is fairly extensive, but we'd certainly do our best with that.
Thank you. Time is up, Madam Jarvis, and we will now proceed to Madam Normandian. Madam Normandian, you will have 2.5 minutes. You can please proceed.
Comme annoncé,
As I said, I will share my time with my colleague.
Manley, please.
Well, thank you very much, Madam Chair. I want to just follow up on the undocumented workers that are already here. And has the government considered, or the department considered, putting out an amnesty so that, you know, if these are workers that you're saying are difficult to reach, having an amnesty and offering a pathway to citizenship? If some of these workers have been here for a long time working, I'm sure that they would love to be documented and to have that ability to have citizenship, so they can come and go from the country without, you know, fear of losing their ability to return. Oh, you're on mute.
Oh, I'm sorry, I wasn't quick enough on the mute button. I apologize, Madam Chair. Thank you very much for the question. It's certainly a very complex area and a complex space, and a number of considerations that are behind that one. You know, policy choice question would be one for the minister.
And then just with the graduates program, how many spaces were available for that? And are those graduates, if they fit into other categories but may not have experience in those categories yet, are they able to apply through other pathways?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair, for the question. So there were 40,000 spaces for international graduates in this particular program. And the other pathways do continue, and we know that international graduates tend to do very well in express entry under the Canada Experience class, for example. In terms of as to who may apply to the other pathways, if a student had the required healthcare experience, then they may apply under that stream. And quite similarly, if an international graduate happened to be an essential worker and met the criteria for that program, then we may see people in that space. And certainly,
sorry for interrupting, Ms. Jarvis. Time is up. We will proceed to Ms. Kwan. Ms. Kwan, you will have 2.5 minutes for your round of questioning. You can please proceed.
Thank you. For the applicants whose work permit may have expired after they have made the application, will they have implied status, or would there be a process of bridging work permit in place for them?
Thank you, Madam Chair. That's a good question, and one that we are looking at. Per the terms of public policy, people do need to be in status and currently working. However, that does not mean that those who apply and their work permit may expire while they've applied. They can certainly reapply, as the honourable member was referring to retain that status.
Sorry, is the official saying then that if your work permit is expired after you've made the application under this stream, and if you're not able to resecure status, that you would be disqualified?
In that particular instance, Ms. Kwan, we would have to, sorry, Madam Chair, we would have to look at that particular situation, and that's one thing that we are considering now. But from the requirements of the public policy, one must be in status when they apply.
Sorry,
and we are, and I think, sorry, Madam Chair, I think the hope is that applicants would avail themselves of the facilitative measures that are in place now to renew their status.
Yes, but there are some individuals who may not be able to reapply because they might be on a LMIA work-specific work permit. And if they can't secure another LMIA, they'll be out of status. And in that instance, are you saying then those individuals would be disqualified? I think this is actually quite a critical point because I've been asked this question numerous times by applicants and people dealing with the situation.
Madam Chair, as always in the immigration space, there are all sorts of individual circumstances that can arise, and I would need to follow up on that particular instance, Madam Chair.
I'd like to actually get a response for the committee, if I could, from the officials on that, because I think we need clarity on that question. With respect to issues around people having a disadvantage in the language requirement, some of the testing organizations are not able to book people in.
Sorry for interrupting, Ms. Kwan, your time is up. We will now proceed to Mr. Soraya. Mr. Soraya, you will have 5 minutes. You can please proceed.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to Madam Jarvis and Mr. Mills. Dealing with you for the last 5 years on and off, and you've been always gracious, and I hear the best from your side. I really thank you. And the student stream was filled up within 24 hours, 40,000 applications. Am I correct? It was done within 24 hours. That's where we call it low-hanging fruit. These are the young, they are the educated, they speak the languages. And I think we should look more into these students. Madam Jarvis, another question comes from each application costs $1,000 to apply for this application. The number of people who are qualified, they were left behind due to the testing, the language tests, the language school, the language test school, they're all closed. Nothing is available. They couldn't apply for it because there was no language test available. They didn't apply for it. They didn't want to lose $1,000. Is there any other way? Is there any incentive for them for tomorrow? Either they can apply for it. The two streams available, would they have any opportunity to apply for it, even though they're qualified? It's not their fault. It's just either the department overlooked of the situation. What is your opinion on it, please?
Madam Chair, thank you for the question. With respect to the language tests, we know the capacity, and we know that over 100,000 tests have been booked recently. I would say that for international students, certainly it would always be an asset to have that language result under their belt. Language test results are valid for 2 years. And that would facilitate their application through many of the other pathways and economic streams that are available, in addition to the specialty R2PR pathway.
Another question. This question comes from Canadian Franchise Association. This morning, they knew you were coming. This is what they asked me to ask. This is their question. During COVID-19, hospitality workers have been there for Canadians. People getting back from long shifts, traveling in the subways or in the buses. They're taking risk to serve Canadian. Those hospitality workers, just like other essential workers, were out there serving Canadians during the lockdown. Why did the government choose not to include hospitality in the essential non-health care system? They're watching you. If you can provide them the answer, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair, for the question. In fact, the essential workers stream is quite open. The language levels at CLB4 make it fairly accessible. There is also a huge range of occupations. And in addition, the way the hours are calculated, Madam Chair, I wanted to note too, in fact, many seasonal agricultural workers could actually be eligible, for example, if they'd earned the equivalent of 1 year experience over multiple seasons, and they may be eligible. And same for part-time workers. The requirements for this pathway are not restricted to full-time workers. It's open to seasonal, it's open to part-time, and the requirement is to meet that 1 year over the last 3 years. So the pathway is fairly open and facilitative to support the different range of economic positions.
If we can go back to for the construction workers there in the system, I met a Portuguese lawyer, which represents a number of people out there. They have the people for 25 years working under the table. That's what I can understand it. Under the table.
Sorry for interrupting, Mr. Soraya. Your time is up. We will now proceed to Ms. Dillon. Ms. Dillon, you will have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Sorry.
Just 1 second. Yes, Mr. Dhaliwal,
Madam Chair, I have other things scheduled. If you can give me at least the idea until what time this committee meeting will run?
Until 6:30.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Dillon, sorry for the You can please proceed.
Not a problem, not a problem. So I'd like to ask either one of our witnesses, peut-être pouvez-nous dire...
Maybe you can tell us, I mean, those who have the intention of settling in Quebec cannot make an application within this program. Maybe you can explain this to us. Have you had discussions with Quebec while you were developing this program? Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair, for the question. Quebec, of course, knows about the program. And as you know, Madam Chair, Quebec has its own jurisdiction on all economic immigration programs. So this is the reason why this special program here is open for provinces outside, except for the province of Quebec. There's one relevant point that I would like to make. Amongst the criteria for the eligibility criteria of the program, we have also used a criteria.
And I can't translate at the same time, but that people must have the intent to reside outside of Quebec. Alors, il y a une certaine...
So there is some clarity here for Quebec because this program is targeted for other provinces. Thank you. Can you also tell us whether there was an option for Quebec to participate in that program? Oui, en fait, si c'était intéressant pour le Québec, c'est quelque chose qui pourrait être exploré. Nous travaillons étroitement avec nos collègues du ministère du Québec et nous les informons de nos développements. Nous travaillons étroitement aussi avec eux sur leurs priorités. Thank you. And in Quebec, there are people who are afraid that this new program is going to slow down the processing of the applications of qualified workers in Quebec. Will this have a negative impact on the processing of these applications? Thank you, Madam Chair, for the question. My colleague, Mr. Mills, might be in a better position to respond to regarding processing. Yes, Madam Chair, and to answer the question, no. We're actively working on the category of qualified workers in Quebec. And as I also wanted to share with the committee, since January, from January to April, we have processed more than 7,500 applications for Quebec. So be assured that this is a business line that has our full attention, that we will continue to process as fast as we can. And we are in a very good position now to meet the levels that have been thresholds that have been established, and the team is working on this business line. So there is no concern to have. The resources are going to stay where they are. Thank you to Mr. Mills. And you've mentioned during your testimony that you have digitized many files. Could you share with the committee the impact that this will have on the processing of files regarding, the qualified workers that have been selected by Quebec? Thank you, Madam Chair. As I mentioned earlier, with regard to digitization of the files for the qualified workers selected by Quebec, we have a service contract with an organization. So more than 10,000 applications have been sent there for digitization purposes. More than 7,000 have been received, and we're expecting the next ones in the next couple of weeks. So this will allow us to have a capacity of digitized files that will allow us to process these.
Is up for Ms. Dillon. We will now proceed to our third round of questioning, and we will start our third round with Mr. Ellison. Mr. Ellison, you will have 5 minutes for your round of questioning. You can please proceed.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. And I want to go back to what Mr. Soroya was saying in terms of availability under the essential worker category. Ms. Jarvis, you mentioned that there, did I hear you say there was the ability for food service people? I mean, I see a category of laborers and food and beverage processing. I'm not sure if that's the category, or is there something more specific for hospitality and restaurants in that second category of essential?
Thank you, Madam Chair, for the question. The occupations that were set out, Madam Chair, were very carefully calibrated against labor market information, and finding that balance between recognizing the occupations that were absolutely essential and critical over the course of the pandemic, while in recognizing that people who were already employed would be invited, or they would be able to apply. And at the same time, wanting to assure Canadians who have been hard hit with unemployment rates across the country over the course of the pandemic that this wouldn't be a displacement, but in fact a reinforcement. And so that's the very careful balance that went into the thinking behind this measure.
Okay, thank you. No, that's fair enough. My original question was asked by one of my colleagues, Mr. Seaback, in terms of hasn't been as much uptake, obviously, as the student program. So just any thoughts as to why that may be the case? I'm guessing maybe people aren't actually in the country that have the ability. They're already applying through other programs. Is there any thought process on that? I know the student one is a particularly large one because they haven't quite got the experience they need, and this works out well. And I know they're trying to look at other methods either through management or whatever the case may be. So any thoughts on and maybe why that maybe there hasn't been the same kind of uptake in the first two programs?
I think it's just really, Madam Chair. Thank you for the question. The uptake may be a more gradual trajectory as people learn about it, as they hear about it. Whenever there's an innovation, For example, our experience in the agricultural pilot, that took a little bit of time for some uptake there. Most of the pilots, when we try something a little bit more new or leading edge, it can take a little bit more time. Caregivers being the exception, where there's been a really strong demand right from the outset. But the other pilots, we see a more gradual ramp up, and I think that's the same here. It's still early days, and as people have the time to hear about it and they put together their application, I think we're going to see a stronger and stronger uptake as time goes on.
Sure, that makes sense. And I guess the program's open until November. Did I read that somewhere? So, you know, it is interesting because students are always talking to each other. There's 100 different ways. They're always trying to figure out how to get in. So it makes sense that students intuitively would always be aware of that program up front. And I can see why that would have filled up fairly quickly. You know, I'm grateful for some of the categories. There's certainly a fairly broad range under essential. And so I commend them for that. And I think, you know, I just hope that as you guys make recommendations, should this happen in the future, that we could look at, you know, maybe expanding some of the categories and looking for other ways. I always love to see when we're talking about essential workers. We've heard a lot during our study on temporary foreign workers of the issues in food processing. I see they're in there. I mean, that's a category. And so I really do appreciate that. And I guess maybe last questions. I know with 30 seconds left, if it wasn't filled up by the other two categories, would you consider, or is that a ministerial decision of expanding the student program?
Thank you for the question, Madam Chair. And indeed, that is likely a ministerial question.
Okay, well, you could pass along our suggestions here from the committee. That would be great that they consider that as well. But, you know, if the uptake isn't there over time. Madam Chair, that's all the questions I have, and I see that my time is pretty much up.
Thank you, Mr. Ellison. We will now proceed to Mr. Shifke. Mr. Shifke will have 5 minutes for his round of questioning. Mr. Shifke, you can start.
Merci beaucoup, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and thank you to our witnesses for being here this afternoon. My first question, the announcement of the program for Francophones outside of Quebec was very well received by Francophone stakeholders like Exterior Arts Quebec and others. Do you communicate with groups that are outside of Quebec to try to support the goal of increasing Francophone immigration in a minority context?
Madam Chair, certainly there's a communications effort underway, and we are really pleased with the Francophone stream offering, and are really hoping for a strong response to bolster language minority communities outside of Quebec. And we will be watching with great interest. We've seen a fair amount of Twitter chatter and other communications and social media about the Francophone stream. And as that word continues to echo and reverberate, we look forward to a strong uptake.
Merci. The next question is international students. Could you perhaps speak to what kind of an impact this is going to have on communities, on businesses who are going to have more stability, who are now going to know that those that have hired these dynamic young newcomers are actually going to be able to stay and work at these companies and so forth? Can you speak a little bit to the impact that the stream for international students is going to have on small businesses, communities, and Canada in general?
Thank you, Madam Chair. The international graduate stream, I think, will have a number of ripple effects that we're expecting. One is likely the recognition by other international students around the world as to the desirability of Canada and the pathway in Canada. Certainly prior to this temporary pathway, we saw a number of international students graduate into the postgraduate work permit and then choose to stay and live in Canada. We know that international students are well positioned with strong human capital from official language levels, from an education in Canada, as well as Canadian work experience. We see the vitality and the vibrancy across the disciplines, whether it's from some of the scientific, spurring on the innovation in communities. We heard from universities and colleges about the kind of superclustering that happens from college to university to local labor market. And I think this will be a glimmer and a bolster of that confidence in the economy as Canada seeks to recover from the pandemic.
Thank you.
That's the intent.
Thank you very much. And now it's a pleasure for me actually to turn it over to Mr. Manley and provide him with one last question before I think it's time for us to end the session.
Thank you, Mr. Shifke. And Madam Chair, I just have a question. I hear from a lot of people that are applying for refugee status in Canada where the process is slow, where their relatives are trying to help them get here. And I know this is a program for inside Canada. And I'm just wondering if this process is slowing down the application process for people that need to come here as refugees and people who are applying to come to Canada as refugees, if they have these skills, if there is a pathway for them to expedite the process for them, skilled workers who need to get out of the situations that they're in other parts of the world.
Thank you, Madam Chair, for the question. Madam Chair, I'm pleased to report that the Minister has certainly underlined the importance of Canada upholding its international obligations. And over the course of the pandemic, Canada has in fact settled a number of urgent protection cases. We continue to have referrals from the UNHCR and government-assisted refugees, as well as privately sponsored refugees, as border restrictions have allowed. We have actually welcomed a small number, but refugees have arrived in Canada.
Sorry for interrupting, time is up. We will now proceed to Madame Normandin for 2.5 minutes. You can please proceed.
Alors,
without a surprise, Mr. Manley is going to carry on his line of questioning. I will give him my time.
I've actually run out of questions. Thank you all. I'll pass the baton. Thanks.
Madame Norman, take your time, or do you have any questions?
Bon, en fait, peut-être à ce moment-là, j'en profiterai.
Well, I'll take the opportunity to speak to some answers that we've heard. Given that the program does not apply to applicants who would want to stay in Quebec, they have to commit to going outside of Quebec. I'd like to have some detail about the type of commitment they make. What happens if they don't respect the commitment?
Thank you very much, Madame Présidente, pour la question.
Thank you for the question.
Certainly, there is a Charter of Rights and Freedoms in Canada. We have a mobility clause, and people are free to move around in Canada. But certainly the emphasis and expectations set out in the application is that people intend to reside outside of Quebec.
Alors peut-être là-dessus, justement.
Well, with respect to that, if to get permanent residency, you have to live outside of Quebec, and it isn't respected. Can you withdraw permanent residency if the person stays in Quebec?
Thank you very much for the question. I think, again, the expectation has been set, and that's the expectation and part of the application process that will be assessed.
Je sais pas s'il me reste du temps pour peut-être de...
I don't know if I still have any time left, but is there a deadline?
Time is up. We will now proceed to Ms. Kwan and our panel with Ms. Kwan. Ms. Kwan, you will have 2.5 minutes for your questioning. You can please proceed.
I'd like to touch on the 90,000 figure, which is tied to the levels number targets. But the application process is such that it's based on intake versus accepted applications. Why is that? I mean, assuming the government wants to achieve the 90,000 figure, what if, there are many applications where people have applied and they don't qualify? Why not take accepted application numbers instead of the intake number?
Thank you, Madam Chair. That's an excellent question. And I think my colleague, Danielle Mills, may wish to comment on this as well, but I'll make just a couple of remarks at the outset. The program was designed for intake, and that's because of the careful balance that needs to be set in the operational strategy across the department. If it was set at approved or accepted applications, that would require that we have to process all of those applications before we could determine the number. Mr. Mills might wish to comment more carefully on the processing strategy. Mr. Mills?
Merci beaucoup, Madame la Présidente, et merci à ma...
Yes, thank you to my colleague. What I just want to expand on is this. Each application is looked at individually, and in an application, there can be persons with them. So one application can result in 2 or 3 people that would eventually be coming to Canada. So the 80,000 or so could be reached. It's not necessarily the number of individual applications, but the number of persons in the application that will be counted.
So the announcement is actually not really accurate because it makes people think it's 90,000 applications, and you're actually talking about 90,000 individuals. And so there's a discrepancy there with respect to that. I want to go back to the language question. What about people who can't get the language test done? Maybe that's why your numbers are low. What's the government doing about that?
Yeah, thank you for the question about language testing. We know that that there's a capacity challenge there, but the language testing is really, really important, and we know that the research and the data shows that people settle more strongly.
Sorry for interrupting, Ms. Kwan. Your time is up.
What's the government going to do to fix that problem where people can't get access?
Ms. Kwan, your time is up.
Sorry for
interrupting. Sorry for interrupting. Time is up. With this, our panel comes to an end, and I want to thank Mr. Mills and Ms. Jarvis for appearing before the committee today. I know it was on a short notice, but really appreciate for taking the time out to appear before the committee. So with that, I will suspend the meeting, and I would request all the members to please disconnect from the public zone and connect in the camera zone. So it will take about few minutes. So thank you once again, and we will log in to the in-camera details. Thank you.
Thank you.